4:37 local time, south of Sri Lanka, the sea looked empty. It wasn't. On the surface, the Iranian frigate Iris Dana cut through the darkness at 15 knots. Active sonar hammering the water, radar sweeping, course changing every few minutes like a ship that knew death might already be behind it. 7 nautical miles back, 400 feet down, a Los Angeles-class attack submarine followed in silence. The frigate was hunting, the submarine was waiting, and within the next half hour, that American captain would receive an order no U.S. submarine commander had heard in combat since World War II. But first, he had to survive long enough to get the shot. Submarine warfare is not cinematic when it starts. It is mathematical. Slow, frustrating, invisible. A submarine tracking a ship on passive sonar does not see a bright target on a screen. It gets a bearing, a direction, not a distance. That means the fire control team has to build a firing solution from tiny changes over time. 1 degree of bearing drift, then another. Feed that into target motion analysis, and eventually a blurry estimate becomes a usable track. Range, course, speed. But Dana's captain understood the game. Every few minutes, he changed course, randomly, sharply, just enough to wreck the solution the Americans were building. Every time the picture started to sharpen, he shook the camera, and it was working. The submarines team kept rebuilding the solution from scratch while the ocean around them got louder, warmer, and more dangerous. Because this was not just a hunt, it was a race. 3 clocks were running, and all 3 favored the ship on the surface. The first was the thermocline, that layer of water separating warm surface temperatures from colder depths. It had been shielding the submarine by bending Dana's sonar away, but the layer was weakening. The second clock was geographic. Dana was moving roughly parallel to the Sri Lankan coast. If she turned toward shore and crossed into territorial waters, the attack window could disappear. And the third clock was sitting on her aft deck, a Sea King anti-submarine helicopter. If that helicopter launched and lowered dipping sonar beneath the thermal layer, the submarine's hiding place would be exposed in minutes. So the American boat had a problem. It did not just need a firing solution, it needed authorization. And to receive that order, it had to rise. At depth, submarines can receive only the thinnest trickle of communication, enough for a message that basically says, "Come up," not enough for full execute authority. So if command was going to authorize the strike, the submarine had to climb to periscope depth, raise a communications mast, and briefly expose itself to the most dangerous thing in the ocean, a warship already looking for exactly that. Coming shallow meant leaving the protection of the thermocline. It meant entering the water where Dana's sonar worked better. It meant risking radar detection from a mast barely poking above the sea. Normally, that would be a gamble bordering on madness, but traffic offered cover. A massive South Korean LNG tanker was crossing nearby, throwing such a huge radar return that it dominated the area. The submarine's navigator had been tracking it carefully. If the boat came up on the exact bearing line between the tanker and Dana, the mast might vanish inside the merchant ship's radar clutter. At 4:48, the geometry lined up. The submarine rose, through the layer, toward the surface, into the part of the ocean where mistakes get people killed. The mast broke the waterline. The satellite link connected. Message traffic streamed in. Authorization confirmed. The mast came down. The boat slipped beneath the layer again. Now, the mission changed. No more stalking, no more maybe. Now it was a firing problem, but the window was shrinking. Dana was still zigzagging, still active on sonar, still edging closer to protected waters. If she turned toward shore, the shot might be lost. The fire control team kept working. Bearing shift, speed estimate, update, correction, another turn, another fix. At 4:53, the solution finally locked. Tube 1 was readied for a Mark 48 torpedo. Inside the submarine, the launch sequence was quiet by Hollywood standards. No dramatic shaking, no blaring alarm, just procedure. The tube flooded, water rushed in, pressure equalized. For a trained sonar operator outside, that brief sound could be unmistakable. If he heard it through the ship traffic, ambient noise, and ocean distortion. Then the torpedo left the tube. No white wake on the surface, no neat line pointing back to the submarine. Just a weapon sliding into black water, fast and controlled, with a guidance wire unspooling behind it. That wire mattered. Through it, the submarine could steer the torpedo, adjust for target maneuvers, and keep the weapon on the right track through one of the busiest shipping corridors in the world. But the wire came with a price. As long as the torpedo was being guided, the submarine had to stay disciplined. No violent maneuvering, no sudden sprint, no reckless turn that might snap the wire and leave the weapon to hunt alone. For those next minutes, the hunter was committed. Ahead, Dina kept moving. 5 miles. The frigate shifted course again. The technician corrected the torpedo through the wire, bending its path to preserve the intercept. 4 miles. The underwater terrain and depth profile tightened the envelope. Too shallow and the torpedo risked broaching. Too deep, and time favored the target. 3 miles. Dina pinged again. The sonar pulse washed through the water, sweeping over the torpedo's path. If someone aboard got a strange return, it would be brief, uncertain, easy to dismiss. 2 miles. The Mark 48 slowed enough for its seeker to begin doing what made it terrifying. Now it could hear. Its onboard sonar reached forward and found the frigate almost instantly. A 1,500-ton warship moving at speed is not subtle when a modern torpedo gets close enough to listen. Target acquired. The torpedo accelerated into terminal attack. And finally, too late, Dina heard it. Somewhere in that combat information center, a sonar operator caught the one sound every sailor dreads: active pings closing fast on a constant bearing. Constant bearing means it is not passing by. It is coming for you. The alarm went up. The bridge heard it. The captain heard it. The whole ship heard it. But understanding the danger is not the same as escaping it. There were seconds left. Not enough time for a calm sequence of detection, classification, authorization, and countermeasure deployment. Not enough room for a full, evasive turn. Not enough information to fire back at a submarine still hidden below the layer. That is the cruelty of submarine combat. By the time the target clearly understands what is happening, the outcome was often decided minutes earlier by people it never saw. The torpedo did not aim to punch into the side of the ship. It aimed beneath it. The Mark 48 passed under Dina's keel and detonated below the hull, where the structure was most vulnerable. The explosion formed a massive gas bubble beneath the frigate's spine, lifting the ship and then dropping it into its own structural failure. For a fraction of a second, the sea stopped supporting the hull. Then steel did what steel does when physics wins. It bent, it broke, and the warship started to die. But the strike itself was only half the story, because even after impact, the submarine was not safe. If the wire had parted too early, the attack might have missed. If the helicopter had launched sooner, the submarine might have been exposed before firing. If the mast had been seen during that communications window, Dina might have turned toward shore into sanctuary and escaped the kill box completely. That is what makes this moment so brutal. Not just the explosion, the timing. The thermocline had to hold and the tanker had to line up. The fire control solution had to survive the zigzags. The torpedo had to stay guided. And the target had to remain outside territorial waters just long enough. One wrong sweep, one early launch, one turn north. And this story ends differently. Instead, before dawn, south of Sri Lanka, a ship heard death coming with only seconds to spare, and never saw what sent it. By the time rescue boats reached the area, the ocean had already done what it always does. It closed, and the submarine was gone.